Hello, and welcome to this Jets edition of the Purple Journal podcast. I am your host, Joe Johnson. I'm the owner of Purple PTSD Vikings Territory, co-host the Morning Joe's program with another member of the show, the other Joe, Mr. Joe Oberly.
And there's a 3-0 lilt in your voice. I can hear it.
I want to give you guys some bad news. I didn't know how to tell you, so I thought I'd tell you on air. But I discovered live tweeting during games, and I freaking love it.
Yes.
I think I'm ruining the collective brand that we've all built for the sites. But man, is that a slippery slope. Mainly because the reason I brought it up was because a lot of the people seemed really unhappy with the game, and I found myself talking a lot of people off the ledge, which is a position I'm not really used to. Namely, when somebody said, actually it was Spielman's brother said that this 3-and-out Super Bowl team doesn't do a 3-and-out like that late in the game. And
that was the other guy. That was Tom.
Was it?
Tom Bergeron or whatever his name is.
Okay. It was, yeah, I don't know.
But he laid into him. He did have a point. That was a pretty bad series.
It was, but it was like, okay, I mean, that's a little hyperbolic. I mean, I don't think we're going to get to the precipice of the Super Bowl and then look back at that, but I get what he was saying.
I mean, we promise if they get to the Super Bowl, they won't do that.
Specifically that. I just felt like the announcers were overly harsh this week. I don't know. Overly critical, I want to say. Anyway, Joe, how you doing, man? I'm obviously in rare form.
I'm good.
I actually just got done rewatching the game, since apparently when you live tweet, you don't pay as much attention as I typically do. Joe writes for Purple PTSD, Vikings Territory, apparently Vikings Journal still, on the Wayback Machine, and the Sports Post. What'd you think of the game? I want to kind of get your guys'...
You got to introduce Luke.
I will.
Oh, sorry. They won.
There you go. I'm trying to figure out the barometer.
It was not exhilarating. It was a good game. They played decent defense again. I think they were the MVP of the game. Kirk Cousins had an up and down game. Adam Thielen somehow got another 100 yards, which was amazing. The running game showed up in the second half and helped salt it away. But the more I saw the Jets, the more the score should have been that way. So it's good. It's slightly underwhelming, but it's good what they did, what they needed to do, and it was on the road. It's a good win.
I think it's the best way to put it. Slightly underwhelming, but another East Coast win. I'm happy. Clearly. Luke Braun is also here, and I wonder how you feel.
Yeah, it wasn't as much of a blowout as the score would suggest.
Yeah.
The Vikings played 20 points better than the Jets. But the Jets are also not like some scrub team, so it's not like, that's something to be concerned about or anything like that. Ultimately, it was, another kind of weird slow start game, and I feel like that needs to get ironed out, once we start going up against some better teams here. But, they came out of the second half and they just buried them. So it was the least interesting win of the whole week. That's a good place to be.
Yeah, it's not dissimilar to the Cardinals game in that second half, first half difference.
All the national coverage glosses over our game and then goes and talks about all the closer ones. That's a good place to be.
I'll take it. Luke writes for Purple PTSD Vikings Territory. He also co-hosts the Pocket Protectors podcast on the Climbing the Pocket network. Before we really get into the game a little bit more in depth, I mean, a lot of the news, since we're doing the game or the show the day after the game as opposed to a couple days after the game, is really related to the game. The biggest being the injuries that happened by the end of the game. I mean, considering that by the end of the game the Vikings were down 8 starters, I think it was, again, on the road under those circumstances, with an X factor like that wind, which we'll talk about, I think was important. But I think I'll go through these one at a time, and then you guys can let me know where each player is at. starting with Xavier Rhodes, because I know the initial response from everybody was, oh my God, that looks really bad, as in season-ending bad. And the response from the team, from Zimmer especially, has been, he seems to be relatively dismissive from the quotes that I've seen, that, like, he'll be fine and it's an ankle sprain. I've always heard that sprains are worse than breaks sometimes, too.
He said no, and no when he was asked if there was any new information on all three of them. So.
Oh, well, there goes that segment. Let's end the show.
I wouldn't be surprised if all of them missed a little time, but I would be surprised if they all missed a lot of time. Seems like just some stuff happened.
Yeah, I figure the best way then to talk about this would be, how does the team rebound, specifically with Rhodes, because of what happened with Hughes last week, being down to a couple guys. I heard people calling into the K-Fan post-game call-in show asking about Patrick Peterson. I've seen a lot of national guys saying, like, besides the Eagles, Vikings, and maybe it was the Packers, there's some other teams that should be, it seems like there's a narrative people, at least nationally, are taking it. There's some local guys that have written articles about it. Luke, the Vikings trading for Patrick Peterson.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, every team should be interested in Patrick Peterson if they can make the cap work out. That was going to be
my question, because I know you're good at cap stuff.
I would love for my team to trade for good players. Like, that has nothing to do with an injury situation or how you are at cornerback. Acquire good players. That's just good.
The Madden
but
philosophy.
I don't think we can afford him. He's got like $11 million on the cap, and I think we'd have to give up a big player to
Anthony Barr.
And I don't think that's the.
Holton Hill did all right filling in, and Mackenzie Alexander's playing better. You got to hope that you don't lose another guy. It's a sprain in it. If I could say anything, whenever Xavier gets hurt, it always looks like it's career ending, and immediately, and then he either comes back on the field later, or he comes back to work next week. I'm not going to say that's what this is. It was kind of a nasty, it almost could have been an Achilles the way it happened. He got twisted from behind, or hit from behind on the back of his ankle. But it looked really bad. But we'll find out more on Wednesday where his status is. And I think if Zimmer has said that he'll be fine, well, eventually maybe he will be. But yeah, like Luke said, it's possible they could miss a little time, but I don't think. I'm hoping it's. We'd know by now if it was going to be major. I think.
I really just think the Vikings should have drafted a defensive back in the first round so they didn't have this depth issue.
Yeah, that's. I was thinking that too. I'm like, well, I'm a little happier about that than I was. Early in the game, here's a question for Luke and Joe. You were in the live chat, so you might remember this. But we do a live chat each week, and it's mainly a group of writers from each site. And Sean Borman from Vikings Territory was there, and he had said something that stuck in my mind about Rhodes, that he's not playing very well this season. I don't think he put it exactly that way or that nicely. But I was wondering, it was a question that I forgot to put on the agenda, but I wanted to ask when he said it. Is that something that you've seen bear out maybe in his grades, or like is that an opinion that you hold, that Xavier's not playing the same? And if so, why?
I don't think you hear
he is having somewhat of a down year.
I think
he's having some. Sorry,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm pulling up numbers for this.
All right, I was starting to, but I think you don't see his name called a lot because he's doing his job. He has had some issues here and there. He's not total shutdown. I mean, this is just from the eye test, and so I'm not going to say he's playing bad, but he might not be, what he was last year, and I don't know why that would be. Maybe that little tiff with Diggs in training camp, and he hasn't recovered mentally yet.
Or the Michael Thomas thing in the playoffs.
Michael Thomas got in his head, and he hasn't let up. So he is having statistically a pretty down year. he's like, from a yards per cover snap perspective, he's given up something like, God, I think it's something like 1.5 yards, which is like puts him squarely in the like below average corners. A lot of that comes from some of the high volume games, like, you know, he played 77, or he played 55 coverage snaps in the Packers game. Like, that's going to give you a little bit of extra volume to give up a bunch of yards. But he gave up 70 yards in that game. He gave up 83 yards against the Eagles. And that, you know, that can just kind of happen too. I don't think, like, it's clear that, like, this is less who he is than, like, what we've seen before, because, like, obviously, like, we've seen like 5 years of him playing really well, and now, you know, this one he's playing slightly less well. But that's something that happens to defenders. Sometimes they just, like, regress and bounce around, and sometimes they're better and sometimes they aren't better. You know, going up against the number one wide receiver is one thing, and I think he's also been playing a little hurt. So I think he has been having a down year. Why it's happening eludes me a little bit. But yeah, I don't think, you know, you're crazy if you're going, Rhodes kind of gets beat a little more.
Yeah, I mean,
Peterson.
Straight up.
He had an amazing year last year, so it's, you know, anything was going to be a down year too. You know, I think that's a hard thing to replicate. When it comes to
real quickly, I just wanted to say the one injury that does concern me a little bit is Barr's hamstring. I think that's what he went off.
Yeah.
And just because of the nature of the injury, you know, you look at Dalvin Cook and the struggles he's having with it. But
Leonard Fournette. Yeah,
big guy. It can be a long time, or it can be a very short time. So that one concerns me a lot, because they're not. You know, they've got some linebackers there who've been playing well, but having Barr out of the game really would change up this defense quite a bit from what they're doing right now. So.
Yeah, that was my question was going to be, who do they have from a depth perspective there? You don't hear a lot of those guys being called because Barr's out there a lot, you know. So you're right. I mean, it's a huge.
Barr and Kendricks play pretty much every snap, right?
Right.
Seems like it.
Yeah, I mean, they have Wilson and they have, what's his name? They just got back brothers. So there is.
Yeah, Eric Wilson's who got the snaps in relief, so I imagine it would continue to be him. But you do lose the pass rushing aspect a little bit, because Eric Wilson is he's undersized for a linebacker versus Barr, who's like bigger than linebackers usually are. So you kind of lose an aspect, but Eric Wilson is.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be a better cover linebacker.
So they changed up the defense the last couple of weeks. Barr has really been a lot more disruptive. So if he's out any length of time, it's going to hurt him.
Coincidentally, or perhaps not, the offensive line seemed to play better in the second half, opened up some holes for the running game. They focused on Elfline a lot on the broadcast, and I was wondering, Luke, if and obviously Joe too, but your thoughts on Isadora coming in and how he played. It looks like the right side of the line Elfline, Remmers, O'Neal is looking pretty strong, at least at some points.
Yeah, from a pass pro standpoint, no Viking gave up more than 2 pressures, which is excellent. There were, I think, 14 pressured dropbacks, and only 9 of them got credited to actual players, because I think sometimes you don't credit it to anyone because it was unblocked because of the scheme or whatever, or it was a coverage pressure or something like that, where it's kind of nobody's fault. But yeah, I think there were only 3 Vikings who had 2 pressures, and nobody else was worse than that, and that's awesome. And then in the run game, I looked at the game tape of some of the big Murray runs and a big Boone run and stuff, some of the bigger running plays, and they all were sprung by the interior Elfline. The broadcast was right to highlight him. I thought Isadora did pretty well. I don't actually know what his grade was. I can look that up real quick.
Zimmer complimented him in his press conference today, saying on the first touchdown run by Latavius that he sealed off some guy and just really opened it up for him to make it.
Yeah, he did, and Isadora had a good block too.
That's what I was talking about.
Oh yeah, Elfline and Isadora sprung that first.
I think their comment was the Vikings are 3-0 since Elflein's been back, and maybe that's not a coincidence. Yeah, he's been huge. The question that was posed on Twitter, not to keep referencing that I made friends for the first time, but why people were wondering why they didn't put Jones in instead of Isadora. And I wanted to throw that question to you guys as well. I know I'm throwing some non-agenda
Probably
stuff
run
at
blocking.
you.
Isadora's better. I think that's probably your.
Yeah, I think the consensus was he isn't, or why trade for a guy you're not going to use? I guess maybe
they traded us 7.
It wasn't Amari Cooper
was a really
trade.
problematic run blocker in the couple games he played. So they probably don't want to put him out there. He was a pretty good pass blocker, but in the run game he got blown up a bunch in the 2 games he played. So they probably would rather put out a more balanced guy, which I don't know if I agree with. I think pass protection is just like a lot more important. But
the Giants let him go for a reason. I mean, he's a depth guy, and they brought him in there and used him at depth when Elflein was out, and now he's not back. So they'll, maybe it gives him more time to become more versed in this offense. And Isadora's been around a lot longer and had a good game yesterday. Obviously like him because they still got him getting there. So, and I just, I would look towards what the coaches are doing. I mean, they're spending every day with these people, and they're making the decision. It seems like it was a good one. So I don't know.
Yeah, you have to be at least encouraged at this point that the Vikings are in first place and really do control their destiny. I don't know that there's a lot of 5 games left to be played in the division, but I wanted your guys' just before we delve into the game a little bit more, take on maybe the status of the NFC North, what you think about Detroit, who seems to be an up-and-down team. They've beaten a couple good teams. They put away a team they should have beat if they're going to be a playoff team if they want to be. This last weekend, something the Bears couldn't do the week before. That Bears loss was Vikings-esque and heart-wrenching. I find it hard to say that they didn't play well against Tom Brady, especially under the circumstances. And they're a young team, but
I thought I was quite impressed by him.
That's what I meant. It's hard to rag on them losing that game, especially the way that it ended.
They're in last place and they're a game behind us. I don't think first place means a lot. We've had a lot of fun with first place Vikings. We're ahead of last place by 1 game, and also it's week 7. Whatever.
Yeah, but did you see that one drive? It's over.
Vikings are going to have a tough time down in Soldier Field.
I'm afraid of that game.
Absolutely.
That's going to be a tough game.
When is that?
It is last game of the season, December 30th.
Ooh.
That's the away game? I thought that was the home game.
Oh, my bad. Yep, take it back. You're right.
Well, that's
I think we come right out of the bye and play in Soldier Field.
That's correct. Okay. November 18th.
Yuck.
Yeah.
How about
tough?
Yeah, we've struggled even when the Bears haven't been good with Zimmer. So yeah, I'm a little afraid of that. I almost also thought about picking up Trubisky on my fantasy team today, which should tell you how my fantasy team is doing. Ugh.
Well, he's playing well.
Yeah, he's had a lot of. I think 23 or 25 points and then 33 points. He runs a lot, so there's that.
He got a lot of rushing yards in that game. He didn't pass very well at all. He threw 3 picks and kind of did a lot of mystifying things, but he kind of made up for it on the ground.
So this game was weird. I like the aspect of the NFL where, sort of like baseball, there's different stadiums that have different quirks to them. And, I used to kind of not like how New England would muddy up their field before they'd play the Colts to slow them down. I always thought that maybe a sport with this much on the line emotionally and revenue-wise might have as close to a neutral sort of field as possible. But, I like going to the TCF the last year, going to cold games. I really like that aspect of it. But I can't really remember a game where the wind has been as crazy as this game was, and I mocked it on our site, on our Twitter early, saying, yeah, we get it, it's windy, like, stop talking about the wind, but it was insane. And I think that the people, this is such a loaded question, but looking at Cousins' day, looking at how maybe some of the calls that DeFilippos made, they put up a statistic that said that the Vikings, with the wind, had an average yards per attempt of almost 10 at 9.7, and then when they were going against the wind, it was only 2.3 yards per attempt. So I think maybe if you look at the game as a whole, it's kind of hard to say, well, Cousins was off, or he's slumping, or maybe looking at some of the play calls differently because of that wind.
When he threw one pass like 7 yards short of his receiver at one point.
Yeah, you can't blame the wind on that one.
I blame it
just a miss.
And another time he made a bad decision that I think was throwing it one into the end zone that he never should have thrown.
The one that they said should have been picked off.
Yes, and that was not a good decision. So I would not say I'm not going to there's nothing to blame on him. He had a rough start. He got better, started playing better, and I guess I'm not going to look at it one way or the other as which way he was going. But
well, it's strange because really quickly, I just want to say, I think he had a good start because he had that bomb to Thielen, and then it was bad. So it was strange in that way.
I guess I'm calling in first half. First half to second half.
It was bad football, and the game was super long because they kept throwing the ball. I think maybe not so much Cousins, not to be an apologist for him, but clearly it had an effect on the play calling. And I totally am. I'm not going to hide that.
Yeah, his accuracy was sporadic, and I think the wind probably has something to do with that. Yeah. But when you throw a good spiral, it can cut through the wind pretty well, just because the ball is an aerodynamic shape. But if it's if it doesn't come off your hand perfectly, which every quarterback's going to throw a few that are a little wobbly, the wind then will catch it and then take velocity off of it, and then you get weird throws. And if you're worried about that, you'll put more juice in it. You'll try to sail them, or you'll try to rifle one in there quicker, and that'll get in your head and kind of change the way you throw the ball. So you can blame a little bit on it, but then there's times when he threw it backwards at the feet of Diggs and missed a few other passes that I don't think you can blame the wind on all of it. And at the end of the day, he still hit.
Go ahead.
He still hit 2 big long bomb touchdowns. That matters.
And I think you got to put it in context. It's because he's been playing so well that when he does miss, passes like that, it looks bad, and it was bad. But it doesn't mean he's a rotten quarterback and get rid of him or anything. So Joe, he'll be fine. They're not going to trade him for Patrick Peterson. I promise.
Yeah. I just wonder then maybe if they overreacted to the wind, if they were saying, okay, well, let's only run these wide receiver screens, or I'm just looking at the difference between the numbers that they put up in the third quarter, which was, like I said,
I think that's smart football. I would have, the wind was wicked. I pulled Dan Bailey off of my lineup in fantasy football about an hour before the game because I saw people on TV, their hair was blown, their stuff was blown, and it was just everything I saw was windy and heck. It's it's going to be that, and that place is notorious for its wind. So.
That was a clutch move.
Thanks.
That kick, he had that 46-yarder. It just the wind had other ideas. Thielen, though, like you said, Joe, somehow he got his and a mouthful of blood. He's amazing. We've talked about this every week, so it's we don't like to rehash a lot of takes, but it seems like some of the people were saying that if the run game starts picking up, Thielen might not get his. It just seems like him and Cousins are just best friends, basically. I know that the announcer said the same thing, that they want a game plan for Diggs and kill, instead of getting killed quickly, get killed slowly by Thielen, because that's more manageable. But at some point you got to wonder, how are they gonna, stop this guy?
What happened? Didn't Thielen convert he got 3, 15-yard plus receptions, including a long bomb touchdown? Was he killing you by 1,000 cuts, or did he just dominate?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think he did dominate because, you look at early on it was Diggs. I mean, Diggs had 14 targets to Thielen's 10, so.
You broke a record.
And a couple of, jet sweeps and stuff that the Jets were all over. They really, really prepared for all that horizontal misdirection stuff. And I think DeFilippos had to take all that stuff into halftime and throw it out and come out with something completely new for the second half.
Exactly. Diggs makes the most of what's coming to him. He caught 9 of his 10 targets. Diggs caught 8 of 14, and I'm not going to say who's blamed for that or that Diggs had a bunch of drops, but maybe there's more defense on him, and that's what happened. So I saw, Joe, you had on the agenda at one time, do you need to get him more involved? I don't think so. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Diggs got paid in the offseason. Go out there and do your job. If he has a problem with not being involved, and they target him 14 times, then he's got a major problem. It's him. But
he made some amazing catches too, like the one they reviewed with his knuckles under it, where he kind of slid over the top of the ball, and it was kind of a 50-50. He had like a 1-yard catch that he reminded me of that TV commercial that he's in, because it looked like it hit the ground, but it didn't. It seemed like he was maybe more the recipient of, like you said, Luke, perhaps pass plays that were meant to open up yards after the catch type stuff, screens and that sort of thing, and it just wasn't working for whatever reason.
That the Jets the Jets scouted it. Like, they clearly had scouted it very well. They had watched all this like jet sweep pre-snap motion kind of shenanigans that the Vikings had gotten away with for the first 6 weeks, and they were all over that kind of stuff. They were just very disciplined in their gaps. You can tell that's what they practiced for, and that's why all of those plays didn't work. I actually thought DeFilippos came out with a pretty vanilla game plan, and I don't want to say vanilla because the play designs themselves are creative, but he came out with kind of 4 concepts. And Jets were ready for all of them, and he had to really tear it all down at halftime.
So, do you think Thielen is just beating guys at this point, and it's not really a scheme thing? Yeah, so I know we talked about the injuries the Jets had in the secondary last week.
And there is a factor of they were doubling Diggs a lot, they were paying a lot of attention to Diggs still, which is amazing to me that they were allowing a backup corner to be one-on-one with Thielen, a bunch. That's incredible. But, they just came out with, more classic passing designs and just kind of, had your receivers go out and win, and that's, I think, how the second half opened up a little bit. Plus, a bunch of big run plays.
Do you think that they're going to use Aldrick Robinson more, or is he just going to be this guy who's got... a 1-for-1 catch for touchdown?
I think they should.
That's obviously a fluke.
He's the best wide receiver of all time.
How many snaps does he even have?
I heard he had.
I wonder if
he had 4 targets and 3 touchdowns on the radio after the game, and I wasn't sure.
That's true. I don't know
how many snaps he has.
Because is he struggling to get open, and then when he does, it happens to be on touchdown opportunities. Because that's a fluke that then suddenly you put him in more and then actually sucks. But let me look it up.
I heard I think he's got to pick it up even more, and they should give him more, because they just said on the Monday Night Football broadcast that the Falcons have the best trio of wide receivers in the league. So, and so they need to, if you were to throw Aldrick in there, with his touchdown production, I don't know if you can say that. But
3 deep. He
played 8 snaps. So eight snaps last time. He's played 45 thus far in the year.
I don't think it's sustainable.
Yeah, I think you could probably get him in there more.
Yeah, I wonder. I know we talked. I mean, obviously he's not the guy physically that Treadwell is, and Treadwell's been making catches when they call his number. So maybe, he's a small guy. He's a burner. He's doing exactly that. But maybe that's just not a fit for what they're doing.
I mean, we kind of talked about this preseason, right, with Kendall Wright, because like we thought Kendall Wright was going to be like the third wide receiver, but he's like exclusively a slot guy, which is kind of Aldrick Robinson's thing too. And you always want to put someone else in the slot. You always want Thielen or Diggs in the slot before you want Aldrick Robinson, so he kind of gets shoved out of the way. But if you ever get to a point where, like, say you play a team with the best slot receiver ever or slot corner ever, you put Aldrick Robinson in and have him eat up the slot corner, and then have, Diggs and Thielen go up against the outside corners who are lesser in this scenario. So it gives you that flexibility. But otherwise, put Treadwell on the outside and then suddenly you get Treadwell on Mo Claiborne and all their crappy corners are on Diggs and Thielen.
Perfect crime. What do you guys make of this Cousins batted ball situation? I saw I saw his press conference after the game, and was sort of testy with the guy, and the guy gave him a specific play. I think that was within the 10-yard line, and he goes, I don't even remember that play. But he said, I don't think there's one root cause. There's a ton of different variables that go into that, and it seemed like maybe after last week they didn't look at it on tape. He goes, I have to look at it on tape for the last 2 weeks and see why that's happening. I can't answer that question.
Clearly, the other people have, though, the other defensive coordinators, because if they're not getting in, they're standing back and jumping up, and I think he does throw a lower trajectory ball, I believe, and once again from the eye test, and maybe you can get away with it. He's not the tallest guy in the league, and so sometimes it's a tip ball, but sometimes, to have this many knocked down at the line in 2 weeks, obviously the other teams have seen something and they're exploiting it.
Yeah, it leads the league.
Yeah, I think they're telling their defensive linemen to get your hands up, right? If you're playing contain or whatever, get your hands up, and they're saying you can get it. And I think my biggest fear, some of these are just luck, right? Like if it's a bootleg and the player's coming at you, there's nothing you can do about it. You either throw a batted ball or you take a sack. There's nothing. But some of these, I think Kirk Cousins is not very. He's not really manipulating the throwing lanes very well. And if the timing of the play doesn't work out exactly as it's designed, because they've thought about all this spacing and stuff when they're designing a play. But if the timing isn't perfect, because the receiver got knocked off his route a little bit, or he wasn't able to get off the line as cleanly as he wanted, you kind of have to adjust your launch point a little bit and be able to get between them, or put more air under it, and that'll mess up the timing of the play. So that throwing it over more might not be the answer. But I think you just have to be a little bit better at manipulating throwing lanes, and that's just not something that Kirk Cousins thinks about.
Do you think if they did more shotgun plays, it would help, or get him away from the line a little bit? I wonder too. He mentioned doing more crossing patterns and having to throw across the middle with guys, like you said, putting Diggs and Thielen in the slot more. I also sort of blame that on the injuries to Rhodes and Waynes when he went down earlier, because it seems like a lot of those crossing routes, guys are just running right into each other. But I don't know. I'm surprised he's listed as 6'3". He doesn't look like a 6'3" guy to me.
Yeah, I agree.
In person either. When I drive by his house and he's taking his garbage out. Well, yeah, these are nitpicky things, I think. People, like I said, there's this negative aura. People are saying it doesn't look like a complete team, or the team's up and down. I definitely think the score, like you said, Luke, didn't reflect. I'm looking at the game. I think it's 20-10. Yeah, in the fourth quarter. Things kind of fell apart at the end, but the defense, I think, isn't getting enough credit from fans. Not necessarily in general, but I know you guys don't care about that. But to have the third down. What was that?
I'm sorry. I said I put them in my story that they were the MVP of the game yesterday.
Big time. Yeah, I completely agree with you. They. Going back to last week, they had, I think, 0 for 20 on third downs streak going. Yeah. I don't know where that got broken, because it hasn't yet in the fourth quarter of this game, which is really saying something.
Yeah, it lasted deep into the garbage time of this game, where Sam Darnold scrambled away and finally converted a 3rd and 6 by the skin of his teeth, just by running on a broken play.
Right, and his other one was a quarterback sneak, was the other third down play. So They're lights out on third down. There's no.
And you have to,
which is a carryover from last year.
Yep, exactly.
And it's extra encouraging based just on what's going on with the team. You know, this is such a loaded question, and this is the way I want to tip my toe into the pool that is this question is, how do you think this defense is quote unquote back? I mean, when you look at the guys that are out, the leaders too on this defense. I mean, that's
sounds like that.
I mean,
chili.
Yeah, they've taken a lot of steps to be deep at defense. On the defense. Like with developing developing guys like Jaron Kearse to constantly picking corners and constantly getting more defensive linemen in, and even like picking up Tom Johnson, getting Tom Johnson back midseason. And I feel like the defense has been so healthy over the last few years that it hasn't paid its dividends. It's paying its dividends now that they have players that they can rely on, like Jaron Kearse, to come in and play well. He had a lights out game. I also thought Trey Waynes had one of the best games of his career.
Thank you. I read an article just before the show saying with Hughes and Rhodes down, the Vikings are missing their best two corners and are stuck with Trey Waynes as the leader. And I was
7 targets. 7 targets for Waynes, and he only allowed one of them to be caught for 4 yards. It was a swing pass to Chris Herndon that he tackled immediately. And I think it was on 2nd and 15 or something too. So it was
he also helped out.
Still not a successful play.
Too. He had a great game.
Big time.
Unbelievable in the run game. Yeah, he had an excellent game. Kearse had an excellent game. And I think you missed Linval Joseph, but Jaleel Johnson, pretty good run player. Right. You're missing some of these DL rotations. Jalen Holmes actually had a reasonable game in his rotational capacity. So I think that the depth is kind of starting to pick up. But you're missing Rhodes, Griffin, Joseph sat out this game. Barr, that is really all.
Sendejo, for what it's worth.
Yeah,
Sendejo. Yeah, it's a lot of captains, I guess.
That was the thing about last year is they did not get injured in the defense much at all. I mean, they had, that defense was basically out there for the whole year, and so it's nice to hear that the depth has really come in to pick things up and has played well. It gives you confidence going forward. But I guess I would like to.
They prepared for this.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. And I guess I'd like to answer your question next Monday morning or Sunday night, Joe.
I'm a little afraid. Yeah, it's not the best time for them to be missing this many guys. A good way to kind of segue into that game too is to since Luke, you named off a couple guys. We did mention him earlier, but what did you see from Holton Hill? Did you hear anything, Joe, from the coaches, Zimmer especially being the cornerback guru, about his game? He's a big guy and he's a talent. Obviously, he had the off the field issues that kind of screwed up his draft status, but.
Well, they asked specifically about him, actually, and he talked about how he's got the size and he's got the speed and the know-how, and he says what he and other guys are starting to do on this defense is to be in the right spot. They're trained, they're taught to be in a certain spot, and I guess not only that, but look at their keys, to follow their keys. That's what he was harping on, because he goes, sometimes if you got your eyes in the backfield looking at the quarterback when your key is right out in front of you and the guy you're guarding and seeing what he's doing, you're gonna mess up. And he said, I think that's some of what they were doing, but now these guys are playing their keys and playing them well, and it's made a difference. And specifically, it's helped with Holton Hill, he was saying. So.
Yeah, he had a reasonable stat line in coverage, and the interception, which he didn't really earn. Sam Darnold was a mess, but it still counts, and that's good. And he earned it by way of being relatively in the right spot. So by way of not blowing the coverage, he at least earned that. I don't know. If he has to start at CB2, that'll be really interesting.
That's the question too.
Keep an eye on him, right?
I saw people wondering if they're gonna put McKenzie on the outside a little bit. Cheryl's.
If they didn't do that
nickel.
They haven't put McKenzie outside. They've always been more willing to put Holton Hill on the outside than Mackenzie Alexander. They've even put Marcus Sherrills on the outside before Mackenzie Alexander.
That's true.
Years. They're not going to put Mackenzie Alexander outside.
I would agree.
He did. That was his jam in college, though, right? Like,
it was. But
yeah. That's one of my biggest issues with their development.
He's playing well now. So,
what do you guys? So, what is your fear level going into the Saints game as a segue? You know, you look at that, and you look at, like I just said, you know, all these injuries on defense. You're going up against Breeze, who had his 500th touchdown. He just beat his 32nd team, so he's beaten every team. He's not as prolific passing-wise as he has been in previous years because he doesn't need to be. You know, Ingram's back. Kamara, I traded him, and I'll never live that down. Similar to the Zeke Gurley trade from last year that I think Luke and I had.
I've found different ways to ruin my fantasy team this year.
It's the funnest part. Look out. I got Trubisky waiting. Everyone's terrified. Are you guys... I haven't watched a lot of the Saints. You know, I don't watch a ton of the other NFL unless it's like a Thursday night game. And I know that they are obviously winning, and they just eked out a win over the Ravens, but how good are they? Do you fear them? Do you fear a revenge game because of the Minneapolis Miracle? I'll go to you, Joe.
They, they'll be up for it. No two ways about it. They get up every week. They've got a heck of a leader that is as tough a competitor, pound for pound as there is in the league. And he doesn't give up till the last snap. So a couple things that stick out to me for them is, they score 34.0 points a game, but they haven't and they, on the other, I can talk about the defense. They're the 27th ranked in yardage against, I guess it's in points. They gave up 27.2 per game. So, they get in these shootouts and they've beaten. Their schedule hasn't been all that tough when you look at it now. I mean, they got beat by Tampa Bay, which has gone in the tank, and they got they beat Cleveland, and by beating the Ravens, that was a quality win. But they somehow killed the Redskins. That I don't understand. But anyway, I guess I'm concerned. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think it's going to be a tough game for the Vikings. They got a defense. The New Orleans defense is really tough against the runs, but they are, surprisingly enough, with their young secondary, they're pretty. They struggled, defending against the pass this year. So
Ken Crawley's having a horrible year.
That wasn't the case last year, though, right? Like they kind of found some sort of magic, at least to
Lattimore.
They had a good time last year. They put Kenny Vaccaro, who was a struggling safety. They put him at slot corner where he thrived. He's no longer on the team. I think they're getting good play out of Marcus Williams, the infamous messer-up of the Miracle, and Marshawn Lattimore is still Marshawn Lattimore. But beyond that, they do have they have two good secondary players and a lot of other people that are struggling. And I still think that they're just kind of they just have too many players, starters on their defense that just aren't superstars. So then the defense can kind of be picked on in a number of different ways.
How's their run defense?
It's pretty stout. I think I had it here somewhere in my store and I can't find it right now, but it's in top 5 for sure. And
top 6 PFF grade.
Right.
6 PFF grade on run defense.
They are. This is also the team that figured out the Vikings in the second half last year. Their defense. And,
I was gonna say, how do you shake that? They did it with the Eagles.
You feel lob up random.
That's true.
They are the second worst coverage team by PFF grade, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah. Second only to the San Francisco 49ers, who are cratering. Everything in the world is going wrong for them. And it's Drew Brees has been the cleanest kept quarterback in the league this year, the best protected, and that's just a death sentence when it's Brees because you can't blitz him. He's one of those quarterbacks who's better against the blitz than when he's not blitzed. It's unwise to blitz him a lot.
It is. You don't get to him.
You don't get to him, and he can throw over you every time because he's just one of the there's a handful of quarterbacks like that, and it's this huge benefit because then you can just sit back all day because they don't feel comfortable blitzing you, so they'll rush forward. And if your line is good, which their line is protecting him very, very well, he just sits back there all day. So that's the dilemma you're you're working with. So you're going to need guys like Daniil Hunter to get in. You're going to need, I hope Linval Joseph plays. That'll have a huge effect. Sheldon Richardson's going to have a big, he's going to have a lot of weight on his shoulders. But those guys are going to have to get pressure. Because, if you let Drew Brees sit back there, he'll just deal him. Doesn't matter how good you are in coverage.
Richardson's going to have to think he's playing the Jets again. That will
Yeah, he was.
Did he have a game? I didn't even.
He had a couple plays where he shoved the guys around like they were high school players. He pushed one right into Darnold right after a throw that kind of screwed up his throwing motion a little bit. Any hope that Everson's coming back, or where's Dalvin Cook at? It's kind of a two-sided question. I know that Zimmer's been a little coy about Griffin and denying reports that he's out.
I would not be shocked if Griffin goes on the NFI list and doesn't play all year. I really wouldn't be.
Me neither. Totally.
It's not a thing you work through in a few weeks.
Yeah.
No. Tell me about it. I'm on year 3.
Yeah, clearly they thought they were going to get him back at some point because they haven't, put him on IR or anything. But how do you know? How do you know what's going to happen? How do you know what's good for him? But right now, football is probably the least thing on his mind. So I don't suspect to see him. I think Cook scares me a little bit to have that setback. I mean, what Luke said it last week. We were talking about coming back that he was. He said we thought he'd play, and Luke says unless there's a setback, and there was the next day, you jinxed it. And
way to go, Luke.
And you know what? It's with hamstring. So he went back to rehabbed all, and then they put him out. And it's very, we're early this week. It's Monday, but find more out on Wednesday. But I don't know. These things don't heal. If there's a setback, you almost got to give them another week, especially against a defense like this. And I don't mind, though, because I like the way the running game is with Latavius. He runs so hard, and I think what we've seen from Cook so far this year has been tentative anyway, a little bit. So I like him in the pass game. It'd be nice to have him here for the pass game, but
I don't think it's going to. It's just not going to come down to the run game very much, right? You're going to be. This looks like it's going to be one of those shootout games. It's not going to be one of those grinded out, 10-17, 2014, 2015 Vikings games. It's going to be a shootout. So I think the way to attack this team has to be through the air, right? Just by the way of how their defense is played in both phases, you should attack the weaker phase. Right. So I think it's fine if you want to rest Dalvin Cook a little more. It's ultimately you got to get him on the field eventually. But if you keep they've tried to rush him back twice and he keeps having setbacks. Shut him down till the bye if you have to.
Right. I agree. And they got the depth there to handle it. I like Murray. I like Boone, and even Rock Thomas had a nice play.
Yeah, I like Boone too, and Rock Thomas.
At least be a PFF grade, they are also an average to above average pass rushing team.
I wonder if Compton will be back. What was his? I forget now. What was his injury?
Knee, I believe.
Knee.
We'll see what happens on Wednesday too.
Yeah, it's a little different doing a show. I feel a little more panicky just because there's so much up in the air.
We don't have any injury report.
Pretty much. Last thing before we get into predictions is the Alvin Kamara Ingram situation, especially Kamara, who's just deadly, and especially he's able to do so much with limited touches. He had a lot more, obviously, with Ingram being out to start the season. But how do you shut them down? God, this sucks. I was gonna say, Barr. I'd love to see Barr out there pancaking Kamara. That was the mental image I just had, and then I realized
it changed a little bit when Ingram came back, getting him back in there, and it affected Kamara the first week. He did very little, but I didn't see them. I didn't see him against Baltimore and see how it fared out. But they're different, and the Vikings have been pretty good with it. What they need to do is trade for Adrian Peterson, and he can come back and throw a stink bomb into their defensive backfield. But yeah, it'll be tough. They're gonna have to have somebody on him, and Kamara is certainly the guy that concerns me on this team.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the ways Kamara wins, apart from he wins through the air a lot, right? Like, he can do a wheel route, and that used to be Eric Kendricks' bread and butter. He was amazing at covering wheel routes out of the backfield. He's been really bad against them this year. So that might be a way that they attack us with Kamara, and you'll have to be prepared for that, and hopefully that, they see that coming. But it's also just going to be sound tackling. And our kind of second level has been a lot worse at tackling than the first level. The defensive line and kind of the in there guys have been reasonable tacklers. Linval, Barr, the rotational D line has all been very sound in their tackling. But then you get to the outside, with Mackenzie Alexander, Eric Kendricks has missed a few. Sendejo, if he plays, he's struggled, as he always does. He's really notorious for missing tackles. So I think it's just going to be a matter of you have to set the edge very with a lot of discipline. So don't crash in, don't get greedy, just set the edge and force them back inside toward where the meat grinder is, and where Linval Joseph and God, I wish it was Barr, but Linval Joseph and more of the D linemen are Jaleel Johnson and stuff. Those guys are going to they're going to have a better time against a guy like Kamara than if you let him, if you let those plays go bounce to the outside like the Saints are going to want to.
Yeah, I think Hendricks got burned on a wheel route against the.
Yeah, and
Jets.
that was a cross wheel route.
Yeah.
So the difference is that was a tight end lining up as a tight end and then crossing the whole formation and then turning up the sideline, the opposite sideline from where he started, which is a different route than what running backs tend to run. We've been killed on the first route a whole bunch. That's something that's all over our tape that it just kills us all the time. But they're also running back wheels out of the backfield are really, really popular in the NFL right now. And the Saints do it with Kamara all the time. That's where he'll line up next to the shotgun quarterback and then run toward the same sideline and then up that sideline. It's a slightly different thing. Same idea, right, where you're running sideways and then curling upfield.
Yeah.
But it invites a little bit different coverage, and I think if they run a more classic wheel route, the Vikings are going to be a little bit better against that because their zone coverages are a little bit more well-versed in handling that. Whereas the cross the whole formation and then curl up the sideline requires a lot of zone passing, and we've had issues there.
I've heard a lot of people complaining about Vikings defense getting burned by misdirection plays too, and I don't know if that ties into what you're saying a little bit.
I mean,
or why that might be.
Action. Though that's shored up in the last few weeks. They, the Rams killed them on play action, and so did the Bills.
Ugh.
But that has gotten a little better. I think every week they've read their keys a little bit better. They were really, really bad earlier in the season at reading keys, which means that they would look at the wrong part of the offensive lineman and then fall for the misdirection, right? And then they'd be caught way out of position. Someone gets a huge catch. They've been a little bit better at avoiding that.
Yeah, and Joe, I think you're right. I mean, you mentioned the Baltimore game. I looked up Kamara's stats: 17 rushes, 64 yards, TD. 2 targets, 2 receptions, 11 receiving yards. So I wouldn't be upset if that was his line against the Vikings.
Right.
Prediction. To replicate what the Ravens are doing against anybody, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, what is going on? Where'd they come from? But that's a question for another show.
That's just Baltimore, man.
Once a decade. Predictions.
That's what they do.
This is going to be the most interesting predictions I think we've done in probably ever. This early in the week, there's a lot up in the air. There's a lot of weird stuff that could happen that could make us want to delete this episode completely.
You guys were within a point of each other last week.
Wow, I thought I got burned.
No, you lost last week by a single point.
Wow.
Because you both picked the same score for the Vikings, so nobody gained any ground that way. But Joe Johnson picked 13 points for the Jets, and Joe Oberle picked 20. They scored 17, right? And then smack dab in the middle of it.
Wow.
So not a lot of movement. A 21-point lead for Oberle right now, heading into the game.
Oof.
Still anyone's game.
So I think that means Joe. I mean, you always do your preview too, but I'm bad. I am bad, so you have to go first.
All right. Well, I've got. I am really concerned about this game because so much emotion involved. I like that the Vikings are coming back. I like that their weakness is the Vikings' offense strength. I think Drew Brees is having an otherworldly year just because he's just phenomenal at 39, and he's still doing the same thing he has forever. So he's going to be tough for him. They beat him twice last year, but this one's not going to be 3 in a row. It's not going to be tough for him to get again. But all that said, I think the Vikings are going to outlast them 27-24 and get that win at home, which they desperately need. You got to have this one back after kicking away the Bills game. This is the one they got to have to write their season toward.
I was going to say that if we win this game, or if the Vikings win this game, we should have a rule where we never refer to the Bills game again. Because then we could just say.
Good to talk.
I know.
It's like a great. In the Bills game is like this great, like it undoes any positive point about the Vikings. It's like, Trey Waynes had a good game, but the Bills happened.
But remember the Bills? I feel, God, this game concerns me, and I feel like playing at home helps. And I feel like it's going to be a lot tighter. I always feel like games that I predict are going to be huge scoring games end up being these, defensive grudge match type, black and blue division type games. I think it's not necessarily going to be a 6-3 game by any stretch, but I think the Vikings are going to lose, and I hate myself for saying that, especially considering who they're playing. I did also compare Cousins to Brees this week, so I should defend that. But I think the injuries are just too much, especially in the secondary. And I think, it's going to suck so bad. But I think the Vikings will lose, I want to say 21-18. I think it's going to be a weird score. It'll be close. But they're going to lose, and I'm going to be sad. More sad than usual.
Yes.
You want to make a...
Right. So let's give away a gnome.
Yeah.
So we had a decent amount of submissions. We did not have a very high amount of winners. A lot of people were very wrong. We had, if you remember for the Jets game, we had Diggs. His over-under was 6.5 catches, 75.5 yards. To hit the over, he had to be over on both of these. So he caught a bunch of balls, but he only had like 33 yards.
It was a record. He broke a record for most catches and least amount of yards.
Serious?
Right? And
yeah.
So
by 10 yards.
In spirit, I think that makes sense, right? Because like Diggs did not have that great of a game. He got tackled behind the line a bunch. He was like kind of beat up by like a backup corner for like a whole half.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, they threw it to him deep, and that guy was Claiborne was right on him. You're right.
Yeah, he didn't have his game. The defense did force a bunch of turnovers. That was the other another over/under was 1.5 turnovers forced. O'Neal only one pressure. The over/under was 3.5, so he hit his under there. So Oberle was correct on the defense, and I was correct on O'Neal.
We're like the NFC North in this competition.
We are really just beating each other up.
I'm the Lions.
With me on O'Neal was Luft Krigara, David Stefano, friend of the show, friend of Climbing the Pocket, and the Vikings fan with the PH. Oberle, you were alone on the defense. Nobody even bet on the turnovers at all, so you were the only one to go there. You were correct, though.
Yeah.
And taking the Diggs under in a bold but ultimately correct prediction were my parents.
Wow.
I'm going to have to start looking at these statistics. This is like Donald Trump's tax returns. There's something fishy going on here.
And the gnome will go to David Stefano, left Krigare.
Ooh.
Good guy. Also, I believe he writes occasionally for Daily Norseman. Really great guy. LUFT_Krigare on Twitter. You should give him a follow.
That's a good wheel to grease with the gnome. I'll take that.
There you go.
What are the... So I get to choose first for this week, correct? Because
you got it wrong.
Yes. And these are some good ones, and I don't know what to do.
And then Oberly and I are tied, I believe, at this point. So Oberly, you can go before me. I'll go last.
So what are the three for this week? Oof, they're hard.
They are hard. So Stephen Weatherly is the first one, and the over-under is 3.5 disruptions, and that's a kind of obscure word to hear, but basically all it means is your pressures plus your run stops. And a run stop is a tackle in the run game that constitutes a loss for the offense, basically a negative EPA play. So you tackle for 2 yards versus if you let up a 10-yard run and then get the tackle, that doesn't count.
Luke, before you go on, where do you find that? I mean, what give
PFF.
some context.
PFF has both of those things.
But as far as us talking here, I mean, what did he do last week?
Ooh.
He's had, I believe that is like his average. I can look up what he did last week real quick, but let me finish reading these off so you can start tanking it out. The defense over under 2.5 sacks on Breeze. He's notoriously difficult to sack because he gets rid of the ball very quickly. So getting 3 sacks, I think, would be a pretty good game, and that would be what it takes to get the over. And then another weird one, Kirk Cousins over under 6.5 different receivers to catch a pass. See how much he's going to spread the ball around, or is this going to be another all Digsley Thielen show? Let me get you that info on Stephen Weatherly.
And I'm trying to find how many sacks we had against the Jets, but I'm not good at the internet.
3. We had 3.
3. Well, since I'm the sourpuss of the show, always and especially tonight, I'm gonna have to go with the under on sacks. I'm thinking if they had 3, especially with what you said with Breeze, and especially with my prediction that they're going to lose. I don't see that happening unless Hunter comes back. And
I think that's the safest one of the 3.
The under, though?
Yes, that's what I was going to choose.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, I took it.
What do you got, Luke? Anything on...
So in the last 4 games, which he's played all the snaps of, because that's when he gets about 4 or 5 of these games. So 3.5, if he had an average game for him, he would hit the over.
Okay. All right, I'm going with number 3. Cousins is to take the over on 6.5 players to catch a pass.
I like that one. I hope you're right.
Yeah, he did 8 last week. I was going to look earlier. He generally spreads the ball around. He's ever opened 8. It's a little tough, though. That means probably got to get Aldrich in there. You got to get
get a running back or 2, maybe a CJ Ham dump off.
Exactly. So it's a little risky. But
that's targets, right? So it doesn't need to be a completed pass.
Oh, it is?
No, completed.
Oh, it's completed.
Pass.
Okay.
Completed pass. Yeah.
Okay. That's a little hard.
All right, so that leaves me with, I think... So I also haven't said whether I think the Vikings are going to win or lose.
Yeah.
I'm super, super torn. This is so hard to do.
Yeah.
When I'm torn on a game, I default to the home team. So I'm going to go with the win. Just by virtue of it being in U.S. Bank, it's a tough place for a road team to come and play. And I think the Saints are kind of coming off a little bit of an emotional high with the way that Ravens game ended. Maybe they come in a little flat. I don't know.
I'll go on the record and say I hope you're both right.
And I kind of want to go with the over on Weatherly. But since I just looked it up and it seems like he pretty consistently does that, I'm going to go a little bolder, and I'm going to take the over on sacks. Test you, Joe.
Wow. That's a matchup.
I think they're going to get to him. That's going to be Weatherly.
I'll be celebrating. I'll ride along with you.
That'll be good. I hope we'll get some people in here, to give their picks this week and win some gnomes. There's some good over under theirs to consider. So We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and we'll be back next week, regular time. We're going to be doing the Morning Joes tomorrow, but not Friday. So we'll be doing a little less, talk about the Jets a little more, talk about the Saints. Check out all the sites. I mean, we have a ton of content coming out, both written and audio. It's kind of an amazing time to be a part of the old Purple PTSD Vikings Territory network. Come to our live chats. Those are always fun. We'd love to have you. We love audience participation. We love bribing people, apparently. Yeah, so if you're listening to this Tuesday, we'll be on the air live at 9:30, and then we'll have the morning shows as well. So maybe you can click over and check that out, and then click back and check this out. But if you're this far, it doesn't really matter. But this has been the Purple Journal Podcast. I hope to be wrong. And Skull?